So the other day I was having a great conversation, and the guy was saying, what would his 20-year-old self say to his 50-year-old self today? And I was truly intrigued because I said, what would he say? And he's like, get up, get moving, and like, what have you done to yourself? Right? And he started reflecting back on how he used to be really fit. He used to work at a lumber yard and he used to carry wood. And anytime that he felt like he was gaining weight, that he would go for a run and pretty much run it off. And then he got into his 40s, and when he got into his 40s, he really got stagnant because he got hit by a car. And that's a pretty big excuse, but he said it himself. He's like, he let his excuses override his actions. And I think there's a point in time that we get in our life where we let our excuses override our actions. And sometimes I feel like we're in relationships longer than we need to, and that we start making excuses for people just so that we can kind of let things go by and we don't want to have any type of conflict. But when it comes to the fitness world, when we let our excuses take our actions on way too long, what ends up happening is that we become like solidified, right? We become plateaued. And then once you become plateaued, it's so hard to go up, right? It's so hard to make a change in your life, but it's easy to go down. And so today I want to talk to you about what would my 20-year-old self say to me. Well, the number one thing is that when I was in my 20s was that I was pushing myself really physically. Okay, so I would go to the gym because I wanted to look like a bodybuilder, and then I would play just copious amounts of sports. And so the number one thing that I would tell myself is that you need to listen to your knees, right? So it's like at that time I would play basketball until my legs would just give out on me. And so I needed to start creating some type of recovery routine. So that would be number one. So when you're pushing it really hard, the number one thing that you need to do is that you need to find ways to recover even harder, right? So Epsom salt baths. I take fish oils to help lubricate the joints. And then when I injured my knee, I would take certain supplements such as like tissue regeneration that help with recovery. And then the number two thing, and probably one of the other big things, was understanding nutrition. Now, if you rewind back 10, 15, 20 years ago, the only nutrition that we knew was pretty much the Canada Food Guide, right? In fact, I remember being in university and the Canada Food Guide was the only thing that we'd base it off, right? We knew the next science was about how many grams of protein you should be eating based around how active you are. And I think they actually still use that formula. So it'd be interesting to see somebody challenge that formula. And as you see today, like people are playing around with macros left and right. And really food is a personalized thing, right? But you got to match the food with how you look and feel and what the end result is. But back then, I just pretty much ate anything. And actually back then I remember going to university and I would drink a 2 liter of orange juice. I would put 2 raw eggs in there, right? And then I would have 4 sandwiches, 4 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, because whole wheat back then was the big thing, right? Like if you ate whole wheat, you were healthy and it was good for you. And so I would go back to myself and I would challenge myself to do a little bit more research into nutrition. But I'll tell you, back then, like the internet wasn't really a thing, right? And so now, like, there's just so much content and information right now that it's easier to make it so that you can eat better, right? You follow a guy like me, and I'll be able to teach you some stuff on nutrition that's going to work for you in the long term. But those are the 2 main things that I would go back to my 20-year-old self. I never had an issue with fitness. I just had an issue with recovering and eating, right? And pretty much those are the 3 key elements of any type of training program. And so when you reflect on it, you got to ask yourself, like, I know people that were super fit in their 20s, right? And I still recall this one incident where I was in the mall and I saw a buddy of mine, and we used to play basketball together when we were in high school, and I haven't seen him much, right, since then, and this was probably last year, and I seen him at Robin's Donuts, and he was like looking, and he was going to order himself a donut and an ice cap or whatever it was, and I just looked at him like, fuck man, you look like you're like in your 50s, right? Like he had a suit on, right? Works at a whatever sitting job, and he was like gray hair. He was like sweating, right? Like, why are you sweating standing, right? And he was at least 60 pounds overweight. And I was like, how are we the same age, right? I was like, okay, your 20-year-old self when you were super fit and athletic would tell you, dude, stop, right? Walk away from Tim Hortons. You're not playing basketball for 2 hours anymore. Let's start to fix your nutrition. And it's like, dude, you have time for the gym. Yes, you have kids, but you can get up earlier. Like, it's just like me doing these podcasts. My kids wake up in and around 7:45, 8 o'clock, and it's like chaos in here. So what do? I force myself to get up at 6 a.m. I force myself to get up at 5:30 a.m. just so that I can get my own personal time. So there is time throughout the day. It's just a matter of all of us getting more disciplined with our time and really valuing where we spend our time, right? So do we need to watch Sunday or Monday Night Football until 11 or 12 p.m. and then like waking up at when it's time to go to work, or getting less sleep, meaning that, yeah, sure, you might be getting up early, but at the same time, did you sacrifice a couple hours of sleep to stay up late and finish that last episode of Netflix? So as we get into our 30s, 40s, and 50s, we have to be more diligent with how we spend our energy, how we get more energy, and how we spend our time. So I'm just out here trying to get everybody 1% better. I'm trying to get everybody to be the best versions of themselves. And ultimately, I'll see you on the blue.